Good morning, and I'd like to welcome everybody to a special town board meeting related to the budget. I will call this meeting to, I'm sorry, it is September 9th, 2024. And I will call this meeting to order at 9:36 a.m. We were previously, less than a quorum was meeting previously discussed the budget, and a third member attended, bringing us into a quorum, which is why we are now in public session. May I please have a quick roll call?
Sure. Ms. Weatherby.
Present.
Ms. Olson.
Present.
Mr. Goldman.
Present.
An agenda was not prepared or posted, because the only topic, is the 2025, pre-tentative budget.
Correct.
So
Do we
back to the
wanna
question.
talk a little bit about what we covered? Mr. Brandon?
No.
No.
What were you gonna say, Rich? So
Well-
Liz, we're talking about appropriations.
So we're currently looking at DA, which is one piece of paper. Here. Yep. And we're looking actually at the flip side of DA on the revenue side on the back. And we're looking at appropriated fund balance, which is highlighted in yellow. And whether this is something that everybody's comfortable with. In terms of utilizing fund balance to balance this budget. Right now, the fund balance policy, based on our projections for year end, the fund balance policy says. We're gonna actually exceed our policy by about 143,000 at the end of this year. That's what we're projecting. And we're proposing to appropriate 82,000 of that, leaving about 60 available potentially. However, when you use appropriated fund balance to balance the budget with items that are ongoing operational things, eventually the fund balance goes away. It's a one-time money, and then you have to figure out what you're gonna do going forward. So I'm just questioning if everybody's comfortable with this level of appropriated fund balance.
So my question is, why are we funding over the minimum in the year where we seem to have a lot of expenses and we're gonna go over the tax cap? I don't know.
Question.
It's just a question.
Well. So the idea behind the fund balance is always one-time funds. For one-time uses, so we're gonna get ourselves. I get very nervous and that's why. I'm proposing in the pre-tentative budget of exceeding the tax cap, because we can absolutely come in below the tax cap if we seriously deplete our fund balance this year. We can absolutely do
Right,
it.
but when we say deplete, we have a policy now of 30% or whatever.
Right,
So we have a policy in place. It's not depletion if you go to the 30%, it's within the fund balance policy.
But the problem is if we get into a habit of taking out that much money out of the fund balance, it's not gonna be replenished, number one. And we're paying for things that the costs are not gonna disappear. It's fine to pay for the comp plan, but the one-time thing for a one-time expense, it's not fine to pay staff salaries. It'll eventually, the chickens will come home to roost.
so I think. From my point of view, that would be my answer, is that if you do this to a great extent in 1 year. In order to not affect taxes as much, in a couple of years, you could suddenly find yourself in a position where you have this giant. Deficit that you have to figure out how to fund. So utilizing the fund balance more gradually. And on one-time things is a smoother way to approach. Utilizing that to offset the tax levy.
Well,
Which is, I think, what Caitlin was saying.
but I guess what's the point of the policy? If we're always gonna fund it much above what the limits are of the policy, what's the point of the policy?
Well, I think the policy needs to be gradually phased in terms of the use of funds to get to it. I think we use that as the target to get to, but the question is, do we hit that target in 2025 or do we hit that target in 2028 and smooth the process? Because the sheer fact of the matter is, our costs are going up in unsustainable ways, and we can, on paper, fix them for 1 year, but those costs aren't gonna disappear. And when I say our costs are going up in unsustainable ways, in one way, I'm talking about the upward pressure of the minimum wage and what that does to all salaries, renegotiating contracts, bringing our staff in line with comparable positions. Because we all know what happens when, when the county was significantly under. We got our DPW guys as a result of that, because the county's wages were too low, and they lost employees to other places. So we know very well that we need to be, to retain employees, we need to be within an appropriate range. So those numbers aren't going to decrease. And the biggest issue is that 40% of our budget is fire and EMS, and we have no control over those costs.
Understood.
So, and then you have health insurance going up projected up 14%.
You're really projecting 14%?
That's what they're projecting.
We gotta look at other situations. That's ridiculous.
I don't think you're gonna find anything better in a group plan for a small group like this.
I mean, it hasn't been voted on, and I want the board's feedback before that votes.
Yeah, they may cut it 1%, but they don't, once they put that in that kind of budget, they don't have much. But the other thing you've said before is that we have the lowest tax rate
We have
in the
had,
town, so. I don't mind raising it a little either, we're just gonna go over what are the implications of going over the tax cap?
nothing.
Are-
I mean,
There's
there's,
nothing, no,
Aren't there
there's penalties
implications?
or something from
No.
the state.
Not penalties, but
Yeah,
don't they give us something for staying within it for a
no,
number of
no more,
years?
no, that
more?
expired years ago now. It used to be our residents would get a check if we stayed under. Those checks don't exist anymore. I think they funneled out in 2019.
It's been a while.
It's been a while. So no, there's not there. The other thing is too, to stay under the tax cap is to stay under less than 3%. Is there anything
Yeah,
in
I
your
don't
life
think-
that hasn't gone up 3%?
Yeah,
Like,
I get it,
it's just not a reasonable number. It's an artificial constriction.
Right,
So school districts are going over it, counties going over it, city of Ithaca is going over it in terms of allowing the option to do that.
well, we're saying in this budget, if we do what Lucy says, we're definitely going over. it. Right?
Yep.
I mean, I'm okay, as long as it's not too much, how much percentage are we talking about?
About 2.
2% over, which comes to, it's a percentage is less than, it's just over $16,000. So that's,
so 32,000.
yes, $32,000.
So
So to put into perspective, if we stayed under the tax cap, we're only allowed to go up about $48,000. Our what we're looking at renegotiating for a union contract puts us without benefits at $33,000.
it's a good chunk of it
It
already.
eats it really fast. And there are other costs, I mean, and that has reverberations in all sorts of other ways, so.
Yeah, all right.
I mean, trust me, I don't want to bring you a budget that doesn't exceed the tax cap, but like, we are where we are.
Yeah, so the other thing to point out about the 82 is that in the current year, we're projecting adding to fund balance of 78,000, so. We do budget. Somewhat conservatively, but it's hard to say, I mean.
And the
if
bottom
you-
line is we have over $1 million probably in fund balance, right?
Across all funds?
Yeah.
The problem is you can't really look at it that way, you have to look at it by fund. Because you can't commingle the funds from one area to the other,
So we can't use the appropriated funds from DB and to DA.
no. No. So. You really kind of have to look at it fund by fund, so I've made, again, there's notes on here showing that. There's still some funds sitting there that are over and above our policy that can get used in future years
Right.
to smooth it out. But this is a big chunk of it, and this is not one-time spending that you see here. These is mostly operations.
So I'm okay with this because 78,000, we're putting 78,000 into fund balance and pulling 82 out. I think that starts moving us towards the direction of the fund balance policy without.
Yeah.
Pulling down but also, I mean, Rich and I just sat through it, the different fund, so it doesn't impact that. But Rich and I just sat through the fire and EMS one, and equipment in fire is going, and EMS going up considerably. the projection, like the rate of increase of equipment costs has gone up considerably, which I would like to, like, seeing as how you guys use a lot of equipment, I think we need to have, we might end up using the fund balance for one-time
Yeah.
purchase of equipment because to help smooth in the future, to help smooth that capital plan. Because our capital plan, I think it's an excellent capital plan, but it probably needs to be looked at again in comparison to what equipment costs are and see if it's growing fast enough.
When was the last time we did the capital plan?
It's
Well, we
touched every
sat
year.
down and looked at it this year, but yeah, I mean, it's every year the cost of trucks are going up like ridiculously,
Yes,
so.
yeah, so, yeah, the capital, what's in here for the capital plan this year. Is fine based on, you know, the equipment is in here and the funding of the plan is in here.
But our long-term.
But our
projections-
long-term projections may need to be updated.
Right, yeah.
So,
Short-term, our capital plan is fine.
fine.
Long-term, it's what needs to be replaced 10 years from now.
Well, the other thing, I mean, we also earned a lot of interest on our money in the bank.
we have, in the case of, the highway funds, a lot of it is reserves, so it's not just available to spend.
Right. And that's
But it
gonna
does
go,
help the reserve.
but that's gonna go down in the next year.
Yes,
too.
correct.
Rates are starting to come down.
It
So we
is.
should budget for that.
Yeah,
Did we budget for that?
I believe I did, but you can tell me whether or not I am overestimating that. So if you look at the revenue side, and you look at interest and earnings. I have assumed a particular amount of investment, which is fund balance, not reserves. So if you look at the kind of, so on the DA, on the back with revenues. So that's the A fund, I believe, was sheet. Yeah.
Okay, what do you got? Interest and earning?
So I put 3% in, is that too
Okay.
much?
No,
Okay,
that may be too little,
well,
but all right, 3%.
so I
that
wrote
35
notes here
That's
as,
that 35,000 interest and earnings.
so the current year projection includes the reserves. Okay, because of how we calculated fund balance. But in the 2025 budget, it only includes the amount that is fund balance available to invest. Because that's what's impacting this budget. You can't put in
Right.
reserve increases here. So that's the amount we're investing at 3% is the 9,000. That's what I'm putting in for next
I'm
year.
really confused, but we did 35,000 in 20 this year.
So I'm sorry, I know it's confusing, but in the current year, that number includes all invested funds. Both the reserves and the fund balance, so it's much higher,
And this 9,000 is just,
just the fund balance. so-
where do we see the reserves?
The reserves you don't see in here, they just accumulate.
Right,
The reason I've included in the projection for 2024 is because that they factor into my fund balance calculations. And maybe I shouldn't have done it two different methods in 2 different years, and I apologize for that. But in order to make this projection accurate in terms of how much we're adding to the overall fund balance, I had to include that. Okay, but in terms of the operating budget and how much is available to fund operations, it's just what the interest earnings are on the fund balance money. And you can, and my notes indicate how much I think that's gonna be,
which is 9,000.
right? And I'm using a 3% rate,
And so right now we're getting 5%.
right? And so
Rates
I
are gonna
assumed
come
it was
down.
gonna, on average, go down. And so I was being a little
Right,
conservative.
so my guess, I mean, the general thesis is we'll probably get 100 basis points cut over the next year. That would be 4%. I don't know if you wanna use 4% of 3, and it's $3,000 put somewhere. I don't. I mean, it's a guess.
Yeah, I know, everything, it's always a guess, right?
Interest rates, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, also, yeah,
If we
just
leave it this way
assuming,
and more money comes in, it'll just go to. beef up that
It
fund next
will,
year, right?
yeah, so it's probably better be a little more
Yeah.
conservative.
Yeah.
Just to be safe.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I guess so.
But knowing that, maybe it makes everybody a little more comfortable that we're appropriating what we are, because it's possible that we'll replenish some of that. It's just not a known. So,
I think it would be helpful. Is maybe at the finance committee level, it might be good to look at the fund, now that we've adopted a fund balance policy, and look at target dates for trying to actually get. So that there's some degree of
Yeah.
consensus
right,
about where we're aiming to,
because that really requires a long-term fiscal planning.
exactly,
Not just for capital,
Right.
but for
Right.
everything,
right?
which is. Something we've been talking about in finance
Right.
committee for a
And
while, but haven't gotten to, because it's challenging to
Yeah.
ask.
Yeah.
Right, we,
Okay.
we all understand that what we're saying here,
I sure hope so.
right?
I think I do. Liz, do you feel?
I think I do.
I just wanna make it simple, so people can I mean. It's always a struggle to have it be understood and simplified in a way that everybody can understand it,
Right, it is a struggle, because this kind of budgeting is complex.
yeah,
Particularly when you also have to keep these buckets of money separate.
separate, right?
Yes.
yeah.
I think that's the hardest thing is that if you're not, if you haven't had to even tangentially touch one of these budget, it's that we're not pulling from the same,
Right.
you know, basket, right?
Right.
To pay for everything that we
That's
have.
So we say we have $1 million, but if one fund can't be appropriated, and
Right.
it's not there, doesn't help you.
Well, the school district ran into that problem. I saw criticisms. It's like, well, you have money to build a new building or renovate a building, but you're not keeping teachers. And it's like, well, those are very different
Right,
sources of funds
Right.
and ways funds were taxed. And so that's not interchangeable, and we're in the same boat in the town, so. Okay. Well, Scott's enjoying every minute of this.
Fine,
Ready to move on to DB?
sure.
Sounds good.
Okay, so moving on to DB. Which is all on one side of the sheet. Because it's short. So, again, DB is where you're looking at your highway maintenance and repair.
Yeah, I don't think people changed here either. It actually went down. My equipment. But the PS line obviously went, up, so.
So again, the personal services incorporate contractual, what we anticipate our contractual commitments are going to be. And benefits as well.
Why is social security up so?
Social security,
Under
Yeah,
employee
line.
benefits? It's up like 25%.
yeah, I think that's just a factor of the salaries that are going up 26%.
Salaries are going up 26%?
Right, in here.
In this line
In
there.
this line they are.
Yeah.
Again, part of it is how they're allocated among activities,
Yeah.
right? That's the challenge with the DPW
So
staff
confused.
that are in multiple budgets. And the rate of change could vary depending on where their time is allocated. So it doesn't necessarily totally encompass compensation changes.
It's also that you're projecting more time being spent in this.
Yeah,
So
so we're
it's
What is-
salary, it's a salary increase combined with
more
Scott is
time.
allocating more time of his staff in this line in 2025 than he did in 2024.
So we should see a correction on the number line. And also, right?
Right. Which we were just looking at in yay, and then.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
Okay. This is so confusing.
Why is the health insurance going down?
someone is, I'm trying to think about that.
Just because I know, because they're gonna be part of the consortium,
Yeah.
they have to be,
They are all part of the
Right.
consortium. I'm
And-
trying to remember.
that's going up.
That's a good question, and I don't know if I can answer it right now, other than it has to do with. I know why,
Maybe
sorry, I had to
Michelle-
think about it a
Michelle-
minute, there's so many
Taking-
Isn't
pieces.
So
somebody
we can't
coming
say.
around?
When we
no.
budgeted in 2024, we assumed that a position, a full-time position was gonna have a family plan, and when we hired that person, they did not enroll in
Okay.
our health insurance. So budget to budget, it's going down because we actually have someone
Okay.
who we had thought would be on the plan, coming off the plan.
Okay.
That's why. But if you look at the projection, that might be a little high, actually. So, because the next year's health insurance is based on the people that are enrolled.
You know, one thing, they still don't have in the consortium, possibility of a couple.
Subscriber and
not-
spouse, yeah.
They
that's
don't,
not
and
an
that,
option.
that's ridiculous.
You got a
I don't
single
know,
or
it
family.
can't be that hard to put in.
I know I have it at work.
I think our dental plan has it.
Our dental plan has it, yeah.
So I think we need. I mean, I hate to say this, but the Teamsters have a great health plan and he offers to cover everybody.
At 100% cost to the town, yes.
No, but it would come out less. That the employees are only paying 10%. But if, I'm not sure, I'm not saying, I'm saying we should actually look into this because 14% is ridiculous. I mean, I get I'm just saying that it's a very good plan. They have. What's so
I-
funny?
So,
I think the plan will be more expensive. than
Which
what we
plan?
have, the Teamsters plan.
Have you looked at it?
I've looked at it in other contracts.
Yeah,
so when I have a new deputy in place, I can have he or she gather that information.
and I think we have to push the consortium for this. Whatever.
I know.
Yeah, and we're not the only ones.
Right,
It
I
doesn't
don't
mean we'll have to
understand why they
be
ignore
late,
us. I mean, it's just. It's not that hard, right? Doesn't make any sense. Isn't Morgan now the chairman of the thing?
Yeah, that's what they're texting out. That's a
Yes.
long list.
Just wait, right.
Right. All right,
I think that's a good question. Well, I think you're speaking though to something that is incredibly fair, which is as costs continue to escalate. We will need to look and make sure that we've done our due diligence,
Yeah.
that the town's getting the best deal it can get.
yeah,
And whether or not the Teamsters is the solution or not, we can at least, we can pull some information
You get a
together and look
couple.
at it and get, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if it honestly will impact this budget. I would be surprised
Yeah.
if we could do it this year.
I will just say that I've quoted insurance for small groups, which is what we are.
right,
If we were to, I'm not speaking about Teamsters now, I'm
Right.
just talking about a small group.
yeah,
And I don't think you could do better
yeah,
for a small group than what we're getting in the
Right.
consortium. And I'm not talking about rates of increase, I'm just talking about the actual cost of the plan. So one of the things we have to look at too is over the years, you know, the consortium may have increased at a lower rate than other plans, and now
right,
they're increasing.
I
at a
think that's
higher
one of
rate.
the issues. They really haven't increased, so they're proposing just a one-step increase at 14%, not 5% this year, 5% next year, 5% in 2-3 years. They wanna
But
do it all at once.
if you look at other health plans, I think they've been increasing at double digits for the last
Right,
several years,
right,
and
yeah,
ours hadn't
right,
been.
right, true,
So that might be part of it,
Yeah.
but those are really good questions to ask. I'm not saying we shouldn't look at that,
yeah,
but,
we should just, for our own due diligence.
Exactly.
Yeah,
but those are some of the factors I
Right.
think that are playing into this.
so after the 14, they're gonna come back to a normal rate, you're saying?
But this, or
Okay,
this is
then-
catch up from previous years.
It's catch up from previous years and then
Right,
we'll see what happens.
Then we'll be back to 6,
But-
7, 8% a year.
Yeah, but it is a self-insured plan. It is
Right.
based on actuarial estimates and historical claims,
right,
you know.
And the group is increasing, but they also said that claims are increasing, which is why they have to cover. So we're getting more municipalities to join.
Right, so it's a very large group.
yeah,
Which is suggestive that they're finding it financially beneficial to join, which
Correct.
means they've been other places, but again. We can certainly look around.
And I do want feedback. to Take back to them,
yeah, you got it.
not 14. You're crazy.
Okay.
Okay, so looking at DB as we were, and the reason why health insurance budget to budget was going down, is because we took, one person out of that. Now, I will also point out that we do have, reserves set aside, not in this fund, but in others that do allow for the potential of someone adding into our benefit plan that we didn't anticipate, or moving to a family
Right.
plan for the single. So we do have some contingency funds available if something were to change.
Why is there no line on unemployment insurance?
I'm sorry,
There's
we,
one-
we don't pay insurance for unemployment. We pay, we are self-funded
Self-funded,
essentially. I should probably just pull that out of there,
Yeah,
but
okay. Or just say self-funded.
Yeah.
No.
I'd leave it in and just like, you know,
one of the, I did want to mention that the spending for the capital improvements. Did you want to speak to that a little bit? Because we're projecting to spend and earn a much lower amount.
For next year.
But well, for this year,
Well, 50 now, I don't, that's fine. Yeah, that's a good number.
right,
Sure.
but I guess what I'm saying is that we have a CHIPS allocation of about $150,000 a year. From state aid, which shows
Yeah.
at the revenue side. And so you see at the top, we budgeted for 153
Right.
as the modified budget. And we're planning to earn 153, but we're only spending about a third of that on actual highway improvements this year. But next year, we put in the same amount, revenue and expense of what we anticipate, but you're actually looking into using those funds.
Yeah. I have more, there's more money in there than 150, right?
Right, right.
Cause it's a reimbursement program.
So-
Yeah, it's reimbursement.
Well, what happens is the state allocates money every year, and if you don't use it all, it rolls over, you don't
Yeah.
lose it.
right,
And so it accumulates to having it available then to use if you have a large project or. And you're looking at potentially equipment, is that?
Possibly getting a 10-wheeler, yeah.
Yeah.
so we've only spent $4,400 year to date in that line?
Yeah.
Well, a lot of that doesn't come through until later, because the work doesn't get done till the
Yeah.
end of the summer.
I'm still waiting for Suco to do the work. So, and then once they do the work, we pay them and then we get reimbursed from that work. So it probably won't be until November, December, when we get the payment.
Right, right.
But this,
That's the difference between the year to date and the projection.
or $100,000 difference between the modified budget and the end of year projection.
Right.
Yeah, so how does, I mean, is there something that we can do different to make it better for the budget? I mean, is that what you're asking?
Yeah, I'm just trying to explain that. So the budget for highway maintenance always matches the state aid that we
Right.
get for highway maintenance,
Right.
and it's a reimbursement program.
Yeah.
And so we budget what we think the total available for the year might be. We don't actually ever know for sure until
Right.
the budget passes at the
Right.
state.
Yeah.
But we also know that if we don't use it all, it rolls over.
Right,
And so it's just sitting there in this fund that's can access to do highway improvements. So it's hard to know what to put in the budget, but the bottom line is that it doesn't affect the bottom line.
It doesn't.
Because it goes in as expense and revenue at the same amount,
Matches.
and it matches. So the projection for this year is Scott's only planning to use 50,000 of that money. In the current year. Next year, I put in 150,
Oh, okay.
not
That's
knowing for sure what that might be. But if Scott chooses to use it for a different purpose, he could
I
choose to
we
do
can-
that.
yeah.
We could just change it.
and that extra money's earning interest while it sits there?
There is
Is it
no
a-
extra
No,
money.
there's-
Oh,
We
there is
don't
no
get-
extra
It's a reimbursement.
Okay.
So in fact, we're fronting the money.
Right.
And then they're reimbursing us. So there's no interest
All
there.
right,
And again, there's no real fund balance available to invest in this fund like there is in DA. The only thing there is are reserves. And so there is no revenue stated for interest in this fund for 2025 because the only interest revenue is going to be on the reserve money.
And then like moving forward, if I decided to do that with a 10-wheeler, we will have to raise the money to pay for it and then get reimbursed.
Right, the cash flow,
Yeah.
yeah,
So we have to get together way before,
you purchase it,
yeah, to figure it all out.
correct,
Yeah.
right, but that's just a cash flow thing, not.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'd still get reimbursed for it. So further down on here, one of the things, I didn't get that number on this, printed on the sheet, but, looking at the reserve appropriation of 62. The amount available to appropriate projected is 84 total. So in appropriating 62,000, we're using up the majority of the fund balance that's available to appropriate.
Where are you?
So if you look at the total reserve appropriation, 62,953, or not reserve, the appropriated fund balance, 62,953. Right on the front page at the bottom, in the middle of the
Yeah.
page, in yellow.
Okay,
How much are we putting in this year?
So this year, it's the difference between the 263 and the 289, so about 20,000.
So we're putting in 20, we're pulling out 62.
Correct,
Ouch.
ouch.
I don't like that one nearly as much.
Now, one of the things that's happening here is that there is $50,000 scheduled to the capital reserve, and that's also being funded by this budget.
So that it, well, yeah,
So part of that is to
Is-
fund the capital reserve.
okay,
So it's not
it's one time.
operational money, it's one-time funds.
Okay,
So the majority of the 62 is one-time funds.
so we're really, we can think about it, we're only taking 12, almost 13,000 out for operational use,
Right,
but we're putting in 20
that's
from
correct.
2024.
That's correct.
Okay. And Scott, what's the capital reserve? What will that ultimately be used to pay for? What does that fund help pay for?
What did she put there for?
I think the capital reserve for
Is
this
that for the
is,
capital plan?
I don't know what you mean by capital planning, the equipment plan? No, that's the equipment reserve. So the capital reserves in this would really be used for major road repair or things like that. Not repair, there's a repair reserve, which would be like if you had a washout or something and you had to
Yeah.
repair it, you'd have reserves to do that. The capital reserve could be used for the same thing, but it's basically money set aside if you had to fix a road or do something major. And it wasn't planned in the budget, basically. That's what that's for. I'd have to go look at all the notes about the history of that reserve fund. And the thoughts on the level to which we want to fund it. But if you think about all the things that could happen. In, some kind of a weather event or other things like that, that's what these reserves are for.
Yeah,
Well, I'm not opposed to I'm definitely not opposed to reserving funds. I think that we should do a little bit more digging about what
Yeah.
this is tied to.
Okay.
Cause that's a lot of money.
Yep, and right now that reserve,
And it could just live in fund balance. Unless we.
And there's 75,000 in that already.
right now there's about 76,000 in it that we're projecting. There's some interest that's added to it, has been added to it, but we haven't funded it this year in 2024.
So we didn't fund it in 2024. So this is,
Right,
so
so
we
this
funded it in
is
2023, we didn't fund it in 2024, and we're doing a big hit in 2025. projected.
correct, correct.
I'd like to find out, I'd like to know more about this before we put that much money in.
Yeah, cause I don't see why we would need to, if I don't even know what it's for.
I feel like you at least should know what it is. And to Michelle's credit, I am sure there's a logic behind it. I just
Oh,
don't know
yeah.
what it is.
I just don't have it all stored away in my brain.
See, I don't know. That seems.
And, I
Two
can-
work is budget
I can
there.
look it up though, because there's copious notes on all the
Exactly.
reserves. And
I know
what
there's
they're
logic,
for,
we just aren't sure.
And what
it
the
is.
goals are for funding.
Yep.
them.
Okay,
So-
so this is the capital reserve appropriation.
Yeah,
Yes.
Yeah,
Mhm.
so
Yeah.
DB 230.
is that the same thing go for the repair reserve?
No, it's not. Hold on, that's not right. It's DB 962-230.
Yeah. The 230 is where the money sits.
There's nothing in repair.
962 is the fund balance.
There's
Number.
nothing in 231?
And the repair reserve, you know,
There
I could
is
look
money
at both
there.
of them. There
Yeah.
is money there. There's 100, we're projecting 110 at the end of 2024.
I will make the guess that there is a goal that a target that has been identified for that capital reserve. And this is an attempt to get us to that. But that would be my take, but I would like to just have a little bit more information on that one.
Yep. Yep.
I'm sure we're aiming for a target, but
Right, and of course, if you want to appropriate less, you could adjust that,
Right.
so. Okay,
And the repair reserve 231, we didn't fund it in 2024,
or
And-
2023.
in 2025, we're not going to.
Is that a reasonable
Right.
number, Scott? on repair?
110,
I think
Yeah.
that's why that's
Isn't that
considered
high?
well funded.
I think that's okay. I mean,
That's right.
Yeah, I think it's probably
Yeah.
well funded, because the repair reserve is more for things that aren't as long-term,
Right,
right? Whereas the capital reserve is meant for more infrastructure type
right,
things.
yeah.
That makes any sense. But yes, I'll look all that up and get back to people with information on that. Okay. Any other questions on DB? So the next one is gonna be the most exciting. Sorry.
Oh, you're fine. I don't,
So that's,
I got plenty of stuff.
We're looking at water.
Water District 3, WD 3, it's a single page with a front and a back. And I also have some supplemental information I handed out about it, which is this page here. Yeah, it says WD expenditures at the top.
Oh. Not yours.
Oh, I also handed out a one-page item for water districts 1, 2, and 4. I don't, maybe we should just talk about that briefly. Nothing's really different here. All of the revenues and expenditures are fairly consistent, and they're very small. So I didn't know if anybody has any questions about that. But I wasn't, going to spend a lot of time on this. In the case of Water District 1 and 2, there's really no change year over year in the budget plan.
Yeah.
In Water District 4, the only real change is related to the administrative costs for administering the billings and so forth. And that's just a factor of folks' compensation, where the fund is reimbursing for its share of administrative time. And that's it. Everything else is pretty much staying the same.
Why isn't there an administrative change in 1 and 2?
There is no administrative charge because we don't do the billings. I'm saying that as a question. I'm looking at Carissa.
Well, we
Cause we,
bill them, the village bills us and we
right,
package it up and send them a bill.
but we're not doing meter readings
correct.
and sending out bills and things like that, but we are just passing on the cost from the village to the user, and there's 1 or 2 users. 1 in the case of Water District 2 and 3 users in the case of Water District 1.
Well, I'm not trying to be nitpicky, but who pays for your time?
So per the contract, And it's pretty old. We add $5 to the bill,
Okay,
doesn't have an fee.
And that's incorporated.
okay,
Will Water District 1 change once cars? Reconstruction occurs,
more water will flow through it, but
but not from our side. It's still. gonna be-
But yeah, but it basically won't change what we do. It's just how much water flows through and how big their bill is that they're passing on, that we're passing on. So. What comes in has to go right back out, so.
So any other questions about 1, 2, and 4?
That's me.
So looking at 3, Water District 3, I just wanted to preface this by a few things. If you look at this summary sheet that goes with it, the tentative or pre-tentative budget expenditures and revenues are summarized here. And the expenditures are broken out between what we're thinking of as operating costs, costs that are due to the fact that we have users in the system, that people are using the water. And capital costs that would have to be there whether we had people using the system or not. And the idea of looking at it that way was to see how much of the fee we're charging users actually covers the cost of the use, the operating costs of the district. And how much is taxed, and do we want to move towards having the user fees cover more of the costs of the operations, having the taxes be covering the infrastructure, the cost of the district, having it. So it's sort of a philosophical discussion. The reality is that we, right now, our user fees, well, in 2024, they may not even be covering the full cost of the water, which we're looking into. But in the past, essentially, the user fees have just been paying for the cost of the water that we're purchasing.
Right, and that's partly because we had this big loan we were paying off,
Right,
which is now done.
right. But the question is, who bears the cost of operating the operations of getting the water? The people who are using the water?
Yeah.
Or the people who are taxpayers in the district?
And aren't actually hooked up to the water.
Say that again, Kristen?
So there's the people who live in the district who are paid for the water, but they're still using their own well.
Right, well, they shouldn't have to pay for the water.
Right, and so the user is paying for the water, but we're looking at, should the user be paying for not just the water, but the actual operation of the district? So that they can get their water, that's purification and repairs and reading the meters and all of that stuff that involves making sure that the user gets their water.
And who pays for it now?
Well, right now, it's really more in the taxes than in the user fees.
So-
Everybody in the
Everybody in
town,
the district.
So what we're,
everybody in the district,
so what we're trying to do is, and we won't be able to do it in a single year, it's gonna take a couple of years to be able to do this. But philosophically, what we'd like to do is move everything to the water consumer to pay for anything related to they're receiving the water
right,
and costs associated with that, and the cost to keep that water clean. And then all the costs related to the infrastructure relates to the property owner. And the reason for that is whether a property owner has chosen to connect to the water source or not, there's inherent value in being part of a water district. So if you go sell that property, your property value is enhanced by the fact that you're connected to public water. And so that's why everybody in a district pays for the infrastructure. They're essentially an owner of that district. And that's why they were levied an infrastructure bill and all of that.
how much is that
How much is what?
per user? Well, the thing you just said, that if you don't use the water, but you're gonna tax the people in the district, how much is that per person, per
So those
property?
people have been paying about $650 I mean, it's been going up a little bit every year, but,
About 650.
last year, people paid about $650 on their tax bill for just living in the district. and
Right,
not
so let's
using the water.
try to quantify.
But that's a tax levy, so it's based on their property value, so
Mhm.
it varies from from property to property based on the value of their property.
And that's
This
it's
was,
a flat
you're
fee.
proposing flat fee?
It's a flat fee?
On
Chris?
on the tax bill, yes.
It's a flat fee,
They
it's
paid-
not,
Oh, okay, I'm
Yes.
sorry. I
because it's a
misspoke
water
then.
debt, because it's the
Right.
number of parcels.
Oh, okay.
And
so
that's related
divided
to
out by
state law.
parcel.
alright, so what you
Okay,
just
I'm
said,
sorry.
Caitlin, though, there's an inherent benefit from being on the, water, being on the infrastructure. Water. I mean, has anyone ever looked at quantifying what that might look like? If we're now paying somebody's paying $650 a year and not using the water over a 20-year period, that's, $14,000.
Right, but I think it's important to recognize that this isn't an us decision. The decision was made 30 years ago to form this water district under state law, and these properties were part of the water district. So if something happened and there is so what we're trying to do is we're trying to put money away in reserves now, because when water districts get in trouble, is when the water district, like Water District 1, which we don't own the infrastructure on, is 75 years old and $0 saved. So that's gonna be a huge crisis at some point, potentially. For what we'd like to do with this is start packing some money away. It will never be able to pay for a full replacement or anything like that. But what it does mean is that if there is issues, there are breaks, things like that, that of any sizable need that can be taken care of, as well as setting aside money so that when we have to hire an engineer to look at a capital plan to start fixing infrastructure, that is there. Because these property owners are part of the water district, when this district eventually, with these property owners or not, but whoever's in the district, will bear the burden of the loans the town will have to take on their behalf. And so it's in their property owner's best interest that we have a healthy water system,
Yeah.
because if we don't take care of it and start sucking aside money, they're gonna be hit with a bigger cost at the end. And so that's the idea, is that saving the money now doesn't save the money long term. It's setting aside some money now is going to actually make it better to manage the water district.
Yeah, but, which is true, and we sort of, I know we definitely jumped to what we're putting into reserves as well.
Right, but that's why I
But-
said part of the reason why we're
Yes,
continuing
exactly,
to
exactly.
charge.
Yep, but in this picture, your question is, if you look at the revenue side, which is on the back of this big sheet. The tax levy in this model, because the debt service went off,
Right,
is actually about almost $100,000 less.
right, which is right.
Right.
I mean, it should-
The rest of it is going into reserves. Some of it is going into reserves, as Carissa stated, so that we
Right.
can maintain the infrastructure properly in the long term. But also what I'm suggesting is that we've started to, in this budget. First of all, the rate increase from the cost of the water is 6.5% from the town of Ithaca.
Right.
And then we're trying to increase the proportion that the users are paying to gradually phase
Yeah.
in that the users are paying for the cost of operation of the system.
Right.
And so the user fees are increasing 10.21% in this budget. However, they would have to increase 42% to cover all the operating costs. So we're gonna do it over time.
Right,
So this is just a shift in now that the debt is paid off
right,
and how we're looking at this because we had a little room. But the reality is that this tax levy is going down almost $100,000
Yeah.
and it is benefiting the entire
district,
district, but it's also
Benefiting the
benefiting
entire
the
town.
entire town.
that's
Because,
benefiting the entire town.
well, it's offsetting, if you look at the tax cap.
Right.
This is no longer factored in.
We're
Right.
essentially saving money here and it doesn't factor into the cap, so it's.
Well, we're going over the cap anyway, so.
But
It
if
would be
this had
worse.
not
It's
happened,
really rough.
so this is my
Yeah,
point,
we
if this
would.
had not happened. We'd be looking at a
Which is-
significant amount that we would have to cut in
Right,
other places to meet the cap,
which we're not meeting anyway.
which we're not meeting anyway, right?
We would have to cut significantly to still exceed the cap. So we're fortunate that this is all kind of happening in the same
So the
year.
timing of this is
Yeah,
helpful,
right.
is all I'm saying,
So property owners, to back to the point though, property owners are going to see
a
a
reduction.
41% reduction in
Okay.
their tax levy in this
Right,
water district
okay.
under this proposal. So we are sensitive to wanting to lower that. We're not keeping it 100%.
But I think what my recommendation is here is that we try to keep the tax levy level at this point, or maybe with gradual increases as needed. To fund these reserves.
Which we've never had the
Right.
ability. to
Which we've
fund.
never had the ability to do, so
right.
that the next time we have to do any major work.
Yeah.
We're not issuing a huge amount of debt, we actually
Right.
have reserves to help
Yeah.
pay for it, so. So that smooths things out over time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we did meet with rural water about, I want to say 18 months ago. And the general consensus is that when you can start putting aside money for reserves in a younger system, we're considered to have a young system.
Yeah.
30 years is a young system by their metrics. But the districts that put away money early, it's just like the retirement accounts. You put away money early, you're in a better position because every system will fail.
Now, you're also saying we're losing a lot of water?
Yeah, what's up with that?
Just this year,
Yeah, I don't know.
and
We're trying to figure it
we're
out.
trying to
Yeah.
figure it out, something unusual happened this third quarter, maybe,
Yeah.
or even this year. And we're taking a look at that, trying to figure out what it is.
It didn't show up until this last meter reading that was noticeable, that there was a noticeable problem.
Right.
And that just happened in
How do you
August.
figure it out?
We measure what the town of Ithaca bills us versus what we bill out and how many gallons that is, and then we account for any flushing or any other water usage, and then there's whatever's left over that we just don't know.
We need to track. So are you gonna be looking at infrastructure to see if there's a,
Is it a leak somewhere?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're looking around. I know that my neighbor across the street has a very, very small leak that he's gonna fix, but that's not gonna be anywhere
Right,
near.
that's on
like-
his property,
Yeah.
so it would show up on his bill. Right?
Well, no, it was between the curb stop and the meter, so it's his responsibility, but it wouldn't have been caught. But it's
Okay.
not like it's not like,
What if there are multiple people like that?
yeah, no, right.
It adds up.
So we'd almost have to get like,
Yeah.
eventually, I think if we really want to get down to it, we'd either have to pay Bolton Point to come out. And do whatever they do to diagnose it, or an engineer or firm or something.
How many dollars are we talking about?
It's only 30%. I mean, I know it doesn't, that sounds like a
3%?
lot, but it's
30%
not
of the water.
30 or 3?
30%.
So 15%, I think, is about the average amount of water.
It's
lost
the
in our
flushing in
system.
the summer, mostly.
and it's up over,
Pretty-
yes. It's,
so,
So if you put that in dollars, what is that cost
um,
per user?
let's see. What when you said 30, we're talking about the percentage.
gallons.
Yeah. it's not a percentage.
And 15 is normal, so we don't only calculate. 15.
I'm just thinking about how much that is. I have my notes here, because trying to understand this budget is when this came to light. Um,
And unlike the hydrant, unlike Cold Springs, there's a meter on that, so any water that comes out for selling or whatever.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's,
yeah, that's reflected. in
yeah,
the
that
budget.
one's for Willie's, and then I have another one for when we flush. On that hydrant. The flushing numbers might be off a little bit, but they're not. That's it.
And you're not having to flush more this year than normal years. Really consistent.
The only thing I have not done is contact the fire department, which I will do that. I'll go there now, and ask them if they've done anything, because they might have, I don't know, they don't. They usually.
You
don't
haven't
tell
had
me.
any
We haven't had any
significant
fires.
fires this summer, though.
No. I mean, it's not. I- Usually if it's a problem like a leak, Bolton Point's gonna get a hold of me. They're gonna, because they'll see it on the tank loss, and so it's not that, it must be something very, very small.
so we're
that we just
talking,
can't see.
the money for that quarter would be $5,000 to $6,000.
And distributed over, how many users do we have? 300.
Well, it's not just, we're only charging users what we're billing them for, so it's not distributed to anybody. It's
The
just a
district
cost
fees.
in our budget
Right,
that it wasn't accounted for,
right.
so that's the problem.
And this budget, and still in 2024, this budget has very little wiggle room
Right,
because
And the older the system gets, I think the more loss you're gonna have over time. So we should think about that.
well, and I mean, that's exactly why to save money, so we can hire Bolton Point or whomever we need to come out and figure out if we can't track it down.
Right, so in this, if you look at the WC3, the big sheet,
Yeah.
and you look at the expenses. And you consider the modified budget of under SW3 8320.4 and 0.41, that's your purchases and your loss. What was budgeted was 99 and 14. What I'm projecting is 90 and 25.
that's a big deal.
Yeah. So you're seeing less being billed out to people
Right,
and more being in the loss category.
right. How much,
But
yeah,
you know, and so in next year's budget, I assumed that our water loss was closer to what we think it should be. But I estimated a little high, actually, just not knowing what to do. And I assumed the increases in the rates, that we're gonna charge users. But also the increase in the rate that we're paying is 6.5%. So the divvy between how much are we passing on to users and how much is loss, that's the part we need to work on, because again, until we know what's happening, it's hard to estimate that.
and it's hard to imagine this would go away without attention.
Right,
So then maybe, so.
Right, but
It
it-
sounds to me like you're budgeting not the full amount of the loss for the last quarter.
not next year. I'm assuming that we're gonna
Fix
find a
it.
way to fix it,
Right.
right?
And
But
then-
so that's why I'm budgeting less. And in that category and more in the what amount we're actually charging users,
Right.
right?
So if we were to hire Golden Point to come, how much do you think that costs for them to come look at it?
I'd
Yeah,
have to ask them.
I mean, since this is only a recently known phenomena, it's gonna take a little while to figure out
you
what's
wanna
going.
see the duplicates again,
Yeah, in the fourth quarter,
right?
right? But we won't know that till
November.
November, yeah.
Right.
And I don't know if we wanna wait with that.
Well,
If
we'll-
it's,
Well, the budget will have to be approved.
Oh, yeah, well, I don't think we wanna wait
Right,
and
no, to fix it.
to figure out what's going on,
We
yeah,
wanna try to fix it now.
yeah.
well, the only way to fix it, I mean, you have to see.
Find where the problem is, yeah, yeah. So, and on the reverse side in the revenue, you'll see what I'm recommending for. Water sales of 125 covers all the water costs, including the water loss. Plus a little bit more, and that's what's on this summary sheet, you know, that's how I came up with the 125. Was to try to begin moving in the direction of having users cover more of the operating costs of the district. So that's what I'm recommending at this point. But the increase in rate from the town of Ithaca certainly had a big impact on that. That was at 6.5%.
It's 130,000 for the ARPA funds, what's that?
Okay, so what are you looking at now, Rich?
SW 34089, federal aid.
Okay,
27,000 that was used in 2023.
Right, but now we're budgeting 100, oh no, that's the.
No, it's a different
Yeah.
line.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay,
Nothing for ARPA funds.
no,
That was through the aerator
right.
yeah.
liner thingy.
Right,
Yeah, so the only thing here is the water district is gonna pay for a piece of this vehicle that the DPW is purchasing.
Yeah,
That, cause it'll be used partly for the purpose of that, along with other DPW, work.
So when we buy an electric vehicle for town hall, for code primarily, but water district's gonna take the RAV4. It's in really good shape. And it will be it'll be a much more efficient vehicle for them to use, right?
Yeah. I think it'll be good for not only the water, but for us, for if we have to go get a part, Meyer or something like
Yeah,
that.
it
Then
saves
it's
on the
truck.
gas.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
So this 6,600 is the share that the water district is paying for, and it's coming out of reserves. So,
Then you guys are gonna give us a good deal, right?
You have to what?
Well, we'll see.
Give us a good deal.
We'll see how my budget shakes out. And that's not true. There's ways we calculate this. So I'm
That
just
was a joke.
teasing. It was
That
a
was a
joke. It was a joke, to be very clear.
So yes, and the other costs in this budget, I would say that those things we just talked about are the major changes. The rest of the operational costs, I think, are pretty consistent, and there's nothing unusual or different here, again, other than the debt service going away, the adjustment in the levy due to that, and the beginning to appropriate for reserves for future, and the adjustment of how we're dealing with what we're charging users. And to try to phase that in a little more each year of how much they're paying of the cost to operate the system. So,
Unreasonable.
Now, could you add a line in here? I don't know who would pay for it or how you would pay for it, but for fire. Like if you're in the district, I'm in the district and we have a hydrant. They come in, my house is on fire, they use all the water up, let's say, who pays for that?
Right now, the water district does.
Right,
We've talked about that.
Yeah.
It's not a huge impact, but there's definitely times where.
so,
yeah, we could
always add a line to separate that out. The question is,
yeah, how do we do
How-
it against?
how would you?
It probably should be the town fee fund to probably pay for it. Because
Yeah,
it's a town-wide benefit. So a town outside village resident would be benefiting from it.
Yeah, because right now, if there's a fire up the road from the water tank in Enfield
right.
and they use our water. Enfield's not gonna pay for it, obviously. You're right, so. I don't know how you would even figure that all out, but
Say that again. So the water tank that's up by,
Iredell,
in Iredell,
yeah,
that's in.
it's
Water-
it's in town of Ulysses, but let's say Iredell Road is the town line.
Right,
Let's say there's a house fire just up the road
right,
in Enfield,
right,
they're gonna come down, use their hydrant.
right.
How's that work for who pays for it?
Well, it should be a line item in the fire department's budget. That's where it really should
Yeah.
run, because if they're pulling
Right.
water, whoever they're pulling water from should be reimbursed.
Well, we're gonna end up paying 70% of it anyway, if it goes that way.
Yeah, it's true.
That's exactly it.
Emergency of how much water.
Well, they fill a tank though, so like. A lot of times
They use
the tank is full, a lot of times the tank is filled in non-emergency situations to be ready for an emergency.
Yeah.
But. I'm sure there are emergency situations also. Yeah, I think actually to your point, we'll pay more if we ran
We'll
it through
pay
the
more, yeah,
village.
we'll pay more to the-
Sorry, village, but we will.
Mhm.
Then if we eating the cost of
Yeah.
itself.
I mean, if you wanted to track those different categories of water usage, we can always do that. I mean, as long as you have the data.
Right,
Well, it'd be good to know.
Yeah,
I think this sounds like a great administrative research project for 2025.
For your deputy or Molly?
No, I mean, but I actually think it is. It would be good to look at how much we think that water might be,
Right.
and where it should live in the budget. I don't think we can solve it in this
Right.
one, but it is something that would be worth, I know you brought it up before.
Just that. It knows how much that is.
If we could even put any kind of projection. I think it's probably good to take a break. I have hot water heating up.
Okay,
Original. Scroll.
so, the capital reserve in EB is for highway paving plan. Basically, it's to help fund needed highway paving, planned road maintenance or replacement. Okay, and so there is, in terms of a target, there hasn't been a specific one identified. Because you really have to have a kind of a long-term plan about road replacement or paving. But right now, but I think the feeling is that, it's nowhere near where it would need to be. If that plan were in place, and so right now, again, the balance is, around 75,000, and I think the idea was to start funding that sum.
Right.
But the degree to which we fund it would require a lot more long-term planning work. The repair reserve is really for it equates, or the goal equates to, if there were extreme weather, 2 major town road washouts. And again, it's not fully funded either. The goal is 300,000 and it's funded at 110, so that's where we are with that.
So, and that's a relatively new fund. That fund came in. And
Yeah,
yeah, that was new. We added that for, I believe, the 2021 budget.
is what happened in Maple.
It was also really what happened in Covert and Ovid when those major washouts had, and we realized that we didn't have any funds set aside for that kind of rapid purpose.
So that's the distinction between the two funds.
So Scott, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but off the top of your head,
Yeah.
what?
Good with that to capital this year.
No, I was just gonna say, what would you think? I'm not opposed to putting some away if we're moving towards the goal, but I guess I'd be helpful to know. Michelle, and I think she's right, didn't think that fund, the capital reserve fund was appropriately funded, but what is a goal? Because we have the repair fund, we have a goal of 300,000. What would be?
Yeah, right. Probably at least that,
300?
yeah.
What's in that one?
Well, no, right now there's 75. Basically 75 and a half, and
We could do at least half that.
I was gonna think about,
Yeah,
let's go to 25. Or 30.
to 100.
Yeah, let's get up to,
So, yeah, and then that would just reduce the amount we're appropriating.
right.
Yep.
And we still have the money, so we can then we can assign more in the future. But let's come up with can we put a note that'd be a good goal for
Yeah.
2025, is to come up with a target for that reserve. There's no expectation you hit it all at once.
Okay. Okay, I just thought we took a break on those numbers.
Thank you.
I don't know if we were done with the Water District 3. I feel like we were sort of
maybe,
had concluded that. And folks are comfortable with
yeah.
the assumptions we've made at this point, understanding we have to do more
Yeah,
research
I agree.
and work to find out what's going on with the water loss. Which is not always an easy task, I understand.
So what you're saying in this case, the Bolton Point wouldn't be much help to us because they would have already alerted us if there was something, or, it
Well,
seems
if
like
it
a
was
lot to
something
us, but
obvious,
okay.
They would have. I mean, this has gotta be something very, very small. It just hasn't surfaced yet.
It might be small, and also maybe not significant to them, but obviously significant to our water
So
district.
if we're talking about 500,000 gallons of water,
Can't be
that
that.
doesn't seem small.
It seems weird.
It's not
It's-
small amount
Everything
of
seems
water.
weird about it. I don't know.
Doesn't it seem weird? Yeah, or they haven't billed us correct.
Right, that's what I was
I
gonna
mean,
say.
because that's part of one of the
That's
options
what
we
we-
talked about,
yeah.
right, Krista? Because we kind of went through the list of all the things it could be,
So can
Yeah.
or that our
Check on that?
meters
Yeah, she's got a
somehow
list of things, they've got a list of things to check on.
had something, I don't know,
Yeah.
you know, there's all these things it could be, and it's quite a laundry list. So. But at least we are alerted to it now. And we can start looking at it. I believe that's all we had for your stuff. Is that true? We missed something important that you wanted to point out in the budget or? No. That's it. Think for this meeting today, I have anything else? On these items.
You went through the April, right?
Only the part related to,
Only Scott's department. So just a small piece of it.
does it make sense to go through, since they're here, does it make sense to go through my department?
Sure, if you'd like,
Is that okay? While
Yeah,
you're
'cause he's
here?
the only guy in the meeting, so.
Okay, well then let's get,
but then we don't necessarily need Scott and.
You're free.
Molly.
Right. Right.
Enjoy the sun.
All right.
I don't know if there's a time that we can get together. I just go over the numbers now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this meeting.
bless you.
Okay.
Thank you, guys.
I think we could work through a lot of the stuff in the A fund minus recreation, the need services.
Well, you have to set aside a time for clerk, but clerk is here.
If Rich is only here today, I would like to capture him as much as possible.
Okay. Oh, you're not here for the.
I can't, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the fire department said no.
No, there being a lot of emergencies, yeah.
I don't.
I feel like we would have heard it.
I thought we know when you want to talk about the compensation.
Yes. Okay. Why don't we actually do that now?
Okay,
So, I'd like to move to go into executive sessions, for matters related to, personnel, promotion, demotion, all that good stuff.
Okay, second.
All those in favor?
I
Aye.
Yeah.
Okay,